James never wanted to go to Emily's yearly office party, but he showed up out of duty, not excitement. The gathering was hosted on a sparkling rooftop with a sweeping view of downtown Chicago. A polished crowd of professionals moved like currents beneath the glowing skyline. In his worn suit, James felt like an outsider more than ever. Emily, on the other hand, blended into the scene effortlessly, laughing too loudly and brushing arms too freely. It wasn't only the crowd that unsettled him. It was how Emily barely seemed to notice he was there at all. He hovered near the bar, nursing a drink, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. Something was off. Clusters of co-workers cast sidelong glances at him, whispering behind cupped hands, their chuckles cutting sharper than they should. James battled the urge to walk away and leave Emily to her flawless world. Then she appeared, moving toward him through the crowd, but she wasn't alone. A tall man with an arrogant smirk trailed beside her, his closeness sending sparks of tension down James's spine. "You're her husband?" the man asked with a mocking grin. "Name's Jake. I'll be dancing with her now." Before James could reply, Emily cut in with a light laugh. "You don't need his permission, Jake. Let's go." Her words struck James harder than any insult, the betrayal in them spiking heat through his chest. His eyes narrowed, voice low and sharp. "Don't even think about touching her. Not with your filthy hands." Jake snorted, contempt dripping from every syllable. "You don't own her, pal," he sneered. "I'll dance with her, and maybe more." Without hesitation, he slid his hand beneath Emily's blouse, his fingers grazing her back as if to claim her in front of James's stunned gaze. Rage consumed him. His heart thundered as gasps rippled across the rooftop. Shocked faces confirmed he wasn't imagining the disrespect. The fury that had been simmering now exploded. Running on instinct, James stormed across the floor, his voice cutting the silence as he barked for Jake to back away. But Jake only leaned closer, grinning, daring James to act. The onlookers froze, breath held as tension teetered on the edge. James's hand went to his jacket. Without thinking, he revealed his concealed Colt just enough for Jake and everyone nearby to see. The rooftop fell into tense stillness. Music died as heads turned toward the scene. "Step away from her," James said, voice cold and steady. Jake's eyes flicked to the weapon, then back, arrogance still simmering. "What's wrong, James? Afraid she might prefer me?" His taunt struck like a spark to dry kindling. Emily stood silent, frozen, her gaze refusing to meet his. Whatever hope James had for her defense vanished instantly. The crowd watched, horrified. Jake, still smirking, leaned in as if to kiss her. "That was it," James snapped, closing the distance. He drove his fist into Jake's jaw. The crack rang across the rooftop. Jake staggered back, crashing into a table, shattering glasses and bottles as gasps rippled through the guests. Some backed away while others moved as if to intervene. Jake cursed, clutching his face, his cocky smirk erased, replaced by rage and pain. Emily still hadn't moved. Pale and unreadable, she just stood there. James, chest heaving, felt the weight of the moment crush down on him. Nothing could undo what had happened. Nothing could repair what had already been broken. He looked once more at Emily, a stranger in a familiar dress, then pushed past the stunned crowd without another word, leaving behind the glittering rooftop and the wreckage of his marriage. James looked back at Jake, whose bravado was now stripped to raw shame. The Colt remained untouched at his side, a silent reminder of how far things could have gone. But James hadn't crossed that line. Instead, he'd struck a blow that cut deeper, shattering Jake's ego in front of the very people he tried to impress. Security rushed in, grabbing Jake and dragging him out as murmurs of shock rippled through the guests. James stood firm, fists clenched, chest rising and falling as the weight of it all sank in. Though the fight was over, the emotional storm had only begun, and deep down James knew the night's unraveling had only just started. The rooftop was permanently scarred. Staff scrambled to restore order, but the damage was sealed. Jake, jaw swollen and arrogance gone, was marched out under the cold stares of the crowd. His proud grin was gone, replaced with bitter defeat as whispers followed him out. James felt grim satisfaction. Jake's exit wasn't just an end, it was a reckoning. But any sense of closure vanished when Emily broke her silence. Her sudden cry pierced through the murmurs, her face streaked with tears. She turned on James, her voice trembling with fury. "What the hell is wrong with you? You ruined everything!" she screamed, never once acknowledging Jake's actions or her own role. Her words hit harder than any punch. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whirled on James, her voice trembling with rage and despair. "What is wrong with you? You've destroyed everything," she cried, never once acknowledging Jake's actions or her own choices in the Instead, she piled all the blame onto James. Her sharp accusations, delivered in front of her co-workers, cut far deeper than any blow could. Momentary sympathy people felt for James shifted into something colder. Pity, criticism, judgment. In that instant, the room saw not just the collapse of Jake's false confidence but also the very public unraveling of James and Emily's marriage. James stood still, fists tight, heart aching, realizing this confrontation had exposed wounds in their relationship that had been festering for far too long. In the days that followed, the full and ugly truth came out. Jake's behavior at the party hadn't been a random mistake. It was the final thread of a long-running affair with Emily. As James connected the moments he had ignored, her excitement about the event, the secretive looks, the hushed conversations, a heartbreaking picture formed. Almost everyone at her workplace had known about it, leaving James not only betrayed but humiliated, made into the fool in a room full of onlookers. The aftermath of that night was merciless. Emily's reputation at the office fell apart overnight. Once polite colleagues now avoided her, unwilling to be tied to the scandal. Jake too faced serious fallout. His actions were reported, and within weeks he was fired for misconduct. Their public disgrace mirrored the wreckage of their personal lives, forcing them both to confront what they had caused. For James, however, the way forward grew clear. He refused to let guilt, pressure, or misplaced loyalty bind him to a marriage built on deception. Without hesitation, he filed for divorce, calling the decision both painful and freeing. Though the legal process was exhausting, James found comfort in knowing he had acted with honor. Emily's downfall was the result of her own choices, but for James, the betrayal became something unexpected, a powerful reminder of the value of self-respect. The agony was sharp, the shame heavy, but it opened his eyes. Remaining with someone who didn't respect him would have cost far more than his marriage. It would have cost his very identity. Choosing to leave, James wasn't just walking away from Emily. He was walking back toward himself. He reflected on the courage it takes to face hard truths, to step away from a toxic bond no matter how difficult. Sometimes, he thought, the hardest choices are the ones that save you. He spoke openly about never settling in a relationship where you are devalued, be it with a partner, a friend, or anyone. Letting go of destructive people isn't simply about ending ties. About making room for healthier relationships and brighter paths ahead. In the end, James was thankful for the clarity that night had forced upon him. It marked not just the closing of one chapter but the start of a stronger, truer life. The experience left him with a lesson that would guide him always. Self-respect isn't given to you, it's something you claim fiercely and without apology. Looking back, James said with calm conviction, "That night gave me a lesson I'll never forget. You can't control another person's loyalty, but you can control how much of yourself you're willing to lose for them. Those words, simple yet powerful, summed up his journey. He couldn't force Emily to be faithful, but he refused to sacrifice his own soul for something shattered beyond repair. By leaving, James didn't just end a broken marriage. He reclaimed his power, his dignity, and his future. And in doing so, he gave a reminder to anyone who heard his story. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go of what's destroying you so you can finally build the life you deserve.